We shall be reciting the national prayer. Thank you. You may please honorably resume your seats. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this morning, I'd like to please request that you extend the link for this program on your status, on your Facebook, your WhatsApp, or any other social media platforms. They can be joined with us via the link, the YouTube link at Maritime Academy of Nigeria, one word, and via Facebook live stream, we can be joined by the link official Maritime Academy of Nigeria. Thank you so much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I'd like to please bring you up to speed with the safety brief. In your sitting position, to your left, right, and directly behind you are three major exit doors. These doors are to lead you to the muster point. The muster point is just directly after the parking lot in front of the main entrance of the auditorium. In an event of an unlikely fire incident, please, you are not to rush through these doors. You are to walk smartly and briskly through these doors. Attached to the doors, directional boards that leads you to the muster point. Please, you are to muster there, and our safety and security personnel will attend to you. Please, should you want to make do with the restroom, directly behind you is a major exit door. Approaching that door at the exit, to your left, you find the ladies, and when you negotiate to your right, you find the gents. The same also applies to those of us on the gallery. Please ensure that these facilities are thoroughly utilized and cleaned up after use so that others can as well make do with the facilities. Should you have the need for medical attention, our doctors and nurses are stationed around. You can beckon on them and they will definitely attend to you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, due to time factor and the lack of it, I would like to please quickly run through the introduction. We have our guests here. Please join me as I acknowledge and recognize the presence of Professor Sule Abiodun, ably represented by Dr. Akabogu Koki. Please, a round of applause for him. Thank you. We also have in our midst this morning the presence of Dr. Emeka Akabogu. Please, a round of applause for him, ladies and gentlemen. Akabogu. My apologies, please. Thank you. I would like to please quickly acknowledge the presence of management staff here present. Please, with a round of applause, let's acknowledge the presence of senior management staff of the academy here present. Please, a round of applause for them, please. Thank you. Thank you. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I would like to please invite to the podium for the opening remarks the Rector of the Academy, Commodore Duja Emmanuel Ifedwa. Okay, please, let's put our hands together for the Registrar of the Academy as he comes up to the podium for the opening remarks, please. Thank you.
The Rector of the Academy, our special guest speakers, the management, cadets, good morning once again. You are welcome to the second day of the Maritime Lecture Series. We will have started much earlier, but our guest had to go for facility tour. That is why we are starting at this time. But all the same, we want to assure you, you will not regret having these sessions of presentations. Our guest speakers, you are most welcome. They are friends of the Academy. Professor Sule Abiodun has contributed eminently to the Academy, and because of his tight schedule, he had to ask an ally of his, Dr. Koki, to stand in for him. Dr. Koki, you are most welcome. And the other presenter, Dr. Emeka Akabogu. You are most welcome, sir. I want to plead on the indulgence to please sit quietly and listen attentively, so at the end of the day you have something to take home. Enjoy yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Please, one more time, let's applaud the Registrar of the Academy for that opening remarks, please. Very quickly, ladies and gentlemen, permit me as I invite to the podium for the first paper presentation. The first speaker for today is no other than Professor Sule Abiodun, ably represented here by Dr. Akabogu this morning. Please, a resounding applause for him as he come up to the podium for the paper presentation. Please make that applause louder, please.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the citation of our first lecturer in the person of Professor Abiodun Sule. Professor Abiodun Sule is a marine captain and an accomplished maritime professional. Professor Sule has commanded different fishing vessels, including demersal, pelagic, porcine, refrigerated, and cargo vessels. Besides his deck Class 1 FG Certificate of Competence and Scandinavian, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and Finland Joint Marine Surveyor Certificate, and higher diploma in maritime technology 1990, Professor Sule holds a Master of Science degree in Maritime Safety Administration from the World Maritime University, Malmö, Sweden in 1994. He also attended the Federal University of Technology, Owerri, where he bagged his doctorate degrees in maritime management technology in November 2006, after which he also bagged an MPA, Master's degree in Public Administration, in 2010 from the Ambrose Ali University, Ekuma. He is a fellow of the Fisheries Society of Nigeria and has made substantial contribution to fishery and aquaculture development in Nigeria and the sub-Saharan African region. He is well versed in the arts of mariculture and ocean resources. He has worked for the Shell Petroleum Development Company for about 2 decades as a senior marine officer overseeing rig moves and ship inspection. He spent his last 7 years at the Shell Petroleum Development Company as marine coordinator at Bonny Oil and Gas Terminal, in charge of crude oil tankers, handling an average of 15 LR1 to VLCC tankers per month. Before leaving SPDC, Professor Sule inspected more than 400 vessels, both IMO conventions and non-conventions. Professor Sule resumed as the 4th substantive executive director / CEO in July 2019 and has since become a transformer. His appointment to the turned out as a blessing to several researchers at various cadres that have stagnated for years. He created more directorates at the Nigerian Institute of Oceanography and Marine Research, wearing a new look inside out as his tenure progresses. He has attracted several grant fellowship awards and partnership to the Institute through FAO, AUIBA, and USAID. Several individuals and groups have successfully trained across the length and breadth of Nigeria in the act of fishery and aquaculture under his watch. His tenure at the Nigerian Institute of Oceanography and Marine Research has seen the activeness of RV Abiodun, which her deployment for a pre-assessment of the western side of Nigeria territorial water led to major identification of the lanternfish habitat, which is treasure for food production. Professor Sule has a distinction of traversing extreme spaces with ease and recording outstanding accomplishments. To put it in perspective, he is an academic with purposeful administration capability, garnished with political connections that have paved the way for his numerous achievements. He is a member and current chairman of the Committee of Directors of Research Institutes, where he is setting records of achievement that will take a long time to be matched. He has hosted virtually all the FISON Councils of Fellows at no cost to FESON. Professor Sule has a calm and unruffled mien, even at a tempestuous time of crisis. These are testimonials to Professor Sule's prodigious intellect, strength of character, and commitment to staff and public good. He is an oasis in this climb. Professor Sule is a well-sought-after speaker and public intellectual. He has served as resource person for various causes, including the planning workshop and addressing illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, for Pan-African Vision, for environment, fishery management system, the blue economy, among others. He is currently serving as a member of the Presidential Visitation Panel to EULA on flood mitigation. Ladies and gentlemen, to present the next lecture is Professor Abiodun Sule, here ably represented by Dr. Kuki Ibifubara. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Before I start, MC, is there any time limit to the lecture? Any time limit? 50 minutes. Okay. Good afternoon. It's my distinguished pleasure to be amongst you today. May I rest on the established protocols by the MC. But please forgive me if I have to also thank the rector for inviting us for this Maritime lecture series. He's a lovely individual. I just met him few minutes ago, and I see that he has an eye, he has a vision, and he has a mission. I must also thank the registrar who took us on a tour of the facilities. And I was telling him that this is an impossibility. That, do you have this in Nigeria? I was shocked. But what actually blew my mind away is that I know how much it costs to maintain white paint in a riverine area, because my office is also located towards the sea, and we paint it all the time. But we don't have as much infrastructure as you do. Mr. Rector, where are you getting the money for all this painting? Let me also thank the management of Maritime Academy for being with us, senior management staff, cadets, students, ladies and gentlemen. My job here is simple: to deliver a lecture on maritime resources management, fisheries, and careers. And this lecture would have been taken by my Executive Director, CEO, Professor Captain Abiodun Sule, who is a twin brother of the rector. I'm not saying in age, I'm saying in vision and mission, because they are both trailblazers, and I'm happy to be associated with them. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to your rector for the good work he's doing. I must also acknowledge the presence of Dr. Emeka Akabogu, who I would have wanted to take his lecture first before me, but there was a coup. And I was told to come and do the lecture before him. So I'll try to do justice to the topic. When you listen to the citation of my executive director, it's actually trembling. And I wonder how I am going to fit in those shoes. But with your support, I believe I should try and do justice to the topic. I must also commend the management and the rector for having this maritime lecture series. I believe it's done every year, because you will not know what it does when you bring external factors to come and teach you on an array of subjects. It gives you an insight to what happens in other areas of human endeavor, so that it broadens your mind, it broadens your horizon, and it makes you better individuals. Because as cadet seafarers, you're going to be thrown into a world that it's not only on your area of core competence. There are other things you must know so that you'll be able to join in the national discourse. So, on the occasion of this maritime series, I'm going to start the lecture. You will be hearing words like capture, culture, sustainability, crimes, security, and what might happen in the future. Now, you will all agree with me. It's changing here, but it's not. Can you, who is operating it so I can operate from here? There's a disconnect between. Is the manual mode is not beaming. Thank you. You will all agree with me that fish is an important part of our nutrition. It's highly proteinous, and protein is a building block of life. Fish also contains minerals, also water, and also calcium. For those of us who like to masticate bones in fish, you'll get a lot of calcium from the bones. Fisheries is an all-important sector. Although the Earth's surface is covered by 70% water, 17% of that is where we get our food from the sea. Yeah, according to FAO, about half of the world's seafood per year is produced by aquaculture. You will now want to juxtapose aquaculture in the maritime sector with aquaculture on land. But in most of these countries who are leading countries in Southeast Asia, led by China, Indonesia, India, and Vietnam, you'll find out that most of the aquaculture, which we term mariculture, is done in the marine space. There are two major ways to boost fishery production levels and supplement protein availability: through the efficient management of the capture fisheries and the efficient management of the culture fisheries, be it rearing in natural habitats or rearing in non-natural habitats. Both of these fisheries models can be used to fight protein insecurity in this country. In the capture fisheries, capture means you go out into the open sea and you use your trawlers and then you harvest your fish. In Nigeria, industrial capture fisheries is dominated with inshore demersal trawls, which fish up to a depth of about 50 meters. That is where most of, on-board vessels like this is where you have most of our marine engineers and nautical scientists that follow us to go for fishing in the depths of the sea. The management of the capture fisheries aim to sustainably keep the stock of fish at a replenishable level. But in fisheries management, there's what you call maximum sustainable yield. Maximum sustainable yield is that yield at which when you reach, you cannot exceed that. Because if you look at the curve, it's like a parabola. A parabola means that when you get to the top, you start dwindling. Your catch per unit effort starts coming down. And then you add more effort in trying to achieve more, but you're actually harming the fish or the renewable stock. So I propose that it's always good to remain in the maximum economic yield, which is in the middle, that you can sustainably and rationally exploit your fisheries resources sustainably for future generations, and you also make your money. In the case of culture fisheries, fish stocks are grown in controlled water encampments, which can be manipulated, prepared, and fish are fed from external sources. External sources is that you introduce your feed into your culture system. And there's a wide array of fish culture systems. You have earthen ponds, you have concrete tanks, fiberglass tanks, plastic tanks, flow-through systems, water recirculatory system. All these are land-based culture systems. But how does it affect the maritime industry or the fish in the marine environment? It affects their well-being, because most of the times when we do coastal aquaculture, in coastal aquaculture, the effluent or the wastes from all these culture systems are thrown into the environment. And once there's an algal bloom, fish suffocate, and that can affect your stock. Apart from all this, the only culture system that is in the marine environment is the cages. Although that is still in its infancy in Nigeria. I sailed from the port of Shaman to their cage culture facilities deep down in the ocean. When you reach there, you will believe that it's a marvel. It's like a city where cages are operated like you have oil rigs. They press their automated buttons, the cages come up from beneath the water, they feed them, do their measurements and all other statistical things they're supposed to do, and they lower the cages. So in that area, fish are grown in their natural habitats. But then you have some other fishes who also are opportunistic. They come towards those cages and feed, such as manatee and other fish species. Then you also have the pens. Pens are not, you don't use pens to grow fishes in deep water. If any of you has been to Lagos when you're on Third Mainland Bridge, you will see some bamboo structures in the water. Those are pens that they use in culturing fish. Or you can also culture oysters in the marine environment, whereby you set traps so that when the male and female mate in the marine environment, the spats are trapped by the formations that you keep near shore, and then you can harvest them and take them to your culture facilities. Now, today we are 8 billion people in the world. As at 2020, it was projected that the world population will reach 9.9 billion by 2050. What does that portend for Nigeria, the sixth most populated country? We are about 229 million people, accounting for 2.78%, that's about 2.8% of global population. But it is projected that in 2050, we are going to hit a population of about 400 million people. The question now is, how do we feed 400 million people? Which means there must be rational exploitation of our fisheries resources to maintain a standing stock, and there must be an increase in the land-based aquaculture production systems that can close the gap between supply and demand. ECOWAS reported that between 2015 and 2020, we produced about 7 million tons. But I always have a problem when I'm quoting other people, apart from we that should have the statistics to know what we are producing. As of today, we do not know what we produce in Nigeria. When I get down towards some other slides, I will explain why. Now, we have vast array of ocean streams in the inland now. Rivers, streams, ponds, estuaries, dams, and the rest of them. And when you go down to our area here, where you have the largest Niger Delta formation in the world, you find out that we can use all these water resources to grow fish. If you look at this map, you'll find out that the whole of Nigeria, there are freshwater and estuarine and brackish water systems that traverse the whole country. You might even think that there's no land to build houses. But the issue is that land is available. But there's always this interaction between land usage for crops and land usage for aquaculture and land usage in the water river systems. Because most of these river systems, sometimes they are used for irrigation purposes. And when you have irrigation, you're using that irrigation for agricultural purposes. Now, when you are doing your agricultural purposes, there are some people that don't maintain standards in the use of chemicals for their crops. So, most of those chemicals are released into the river systems. You now find out that when you are releasing the chemicals or pesticides that are PCBs, polychlorinated, or organochlorines, you find out that they affect our fisheries resources, which leads to a situation whereby in some research we have done, you will find what they call feminization. Most of these organo products are converting most of our male fish into females. Your guess is as good as mine what will happen in the future, which means that we will have a situation whereby we do not have replenishment of our of our standing stock. Now, that is inland. Also on land, in the aquaculture setting, there is a fish called tilapia. Tilapia is a fish grown for its white flesh. But there is an issue with tilapia farming, especially where you use male hormones to reverse their physiological states, whereby you are converting all the male and female populations into only male. And how do you do that? You use what is called 17-alpha methyltestosterone. It's an androgen, it's a male hormone. It converts all of them to male. Now, what happens? If you do not really adhere to the principles of its usage, you'll find out that that male hormone will seep into the aquatic system and corrupt the system. Most especially, I give an example. If a pregnant woman, pregnant women have cravings for food. I've seen in some movies where pregnant women chew cement when they are pregnant. Male hormones, which are female resident in them, now have what you call secondary male sexual characteristics. I hope there's no woman here who has beards. I hope there's no woman here, like you see in Lagos, where they are shouting, Oju Elegba. You find out that that male hormone can trigger off her hormonal components to make her have those male characteristics. So that's why inland fisheries must be well regulated so that we do not have all these problems. Now, coming to your domain in the maritime, from Badagry here all the way down to, I think Oron should be somewhere here, huh? Good. You have 853 kilometers of shoreline, of where we can do some serious cage culture that we can feed this nation. 2, there is a lot of fishery activity that goes on along this corridor. If I call my maritime experts now, they can tell me the various points where you can get a lot of fish. I heard that there's a point here called Juju Point for those who go to sea to fish. There are several funny names that they have. But what I want to point out here is that when you get to this Lagos axis, you have a lot of pelagic fish. From nutrient flow that comes all the way from Mauritania down the Gulf of Guinea to this axis, you have a lot of pelagic fish. As you go down this way, you have mesopelagic, and then when you come around here, you have a lot of demersal fish in this area. Because of, when water flows down this way, this is a curve. There's always a lot of nutrient deposition around this Oron axis, where you have a lot of fish. We are going back. Okay, I think it's okay now. All right. Where you have a lot of fish, demersal fish deposition. Now, in this axis, when they were reading the biography of my executive director, he said that there's a lot of lantern fish in this area, where you have a lot of lantern fish and Arioma bondi. In the fisheries sector, for aquaculture purposes and culture, the most important ingredient in fish culture for their feed is what you call the crude protein. So you use protein for protein to grow fish. Now you have a lot of that domiciled around this axis. So if we cite a feed mill production facility in Oron, it will actually be good for the residents of this area, and it will contribute to the national GDP. If we can harness both our river systems and our marine ecosystems, we'll find out that we can contribute to the economy. You'll find out we can create employment, and we find a way that can curb a lot of excesses, like youth restiveness and the rest. The federal government has tried to use aquaculture and fisheries to see how they can stop youth restiveness, kidnapping, and all other issues that pervade the maritime space. I took the liberty of bringing some of these fish species, and all these are caught in our Nigerian territorial waters. Of all the fish here, the only fish here that if you don't have a skill to prepare is the puffer fish, because it contains a lot of poison. But there are a lot of people who eat it, but they have a way of preparing it. You also have the cartilaginous fishes that are fished. I hope you know in Nigeria we eat all kinds of fish. When you have situations of beaching by whales, you know what beaching is? Beaching is echo sounding. When the whale, the whales move by echo sound. So when they throw their beam and they get to an acoustic, it strands them on the beach. That's why you see in some videos, you see our brothers carrying matches to go and remove meat from the whales. We eat everything, and we eat all this. Now the Chinese and some Asians, they fish for sharks because of the properties of the fins that have both medicinal and aphrodisiac properties. Now, when you come here, these are what you call crustaceans. We all know what this is, isn't it? Crayfish. I hope you know that crayfish is very abundant in your waters here and is well harvested. The scientific name is Nematopalumon hestatus. We have tried to do its breeding, but we have not been able to complete the breeding process. Same thing goes to Macrovacuum volenoveni. It's a prawn that is resident in the freshwater environment. But that prawn has a cousin in Southeast Asia that they've domesticated. Now, that cousin is called Macrobrachium rosenbergi. But sometimes when you look at my hair here, it's bald, because when I try and crack my head and see how we can make this available to the Nigerian citizens, it's not easy. Because when you follow the production protocol of Macrobrachium rosenbergi, you find out that Rosenbergi's mouth part is wider than that of Macrobrachium volenoveni. So by the time you're giving them food, there's a problem. Now, that problem was later solved by us having what you call a microalgae lab, where we culture Plicatilis, Skeletonema, Chaetoceros, and all other smaller forms of algae that you cannot see with the naked eye, but is used to feed prawns. Tiger shrimp. In the fishery sector, you have what you call overfishing. What causes overfishing is this shrimp. This tiger shrimp is caught close to our inshore. But because of its economic value, tiger shrimps go for about 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 naira per kilogram. 5. The last time I was in Uyo, I ate what do you call it? There's this soup that they put this tiger prawn on. What's the name of the soup? Fisherman soup. They put this prawn on top. So when they served me and I saw the prawn, I knew that my pocket is going to be in trouble, because I know how much they sell 1 kg of prawn. But this is the main reason why you have overfishing in our waters, because the tiger prawn, when the fishermen are trawling, because you need smaller mesh sites to pick this up, they sweep all our fisheries that are there. Their aim is not to catch other fish species, their aim is to catch the tiger prawn. But you know the funny thing? This tiger prawn is not our species. It's not Nigerian. There's a story that they came all the way from Gambia, where striking workers in a farm released all the prawns, and Nigeria accepted them. And they came here and started doing very well. That's why there's nothing that comes to Nigeria that does not do well. You all agree with me? Now, you find out that when this shrimp came to our territorial waters, it had an issue with our pink shrimp and our brown shrimp, and then is running them out of business because he's feeding and competing with them more. No. Okay, we've talked about this. These are all the arrays of fish species that you can get from the marine environment, as well as this and as well as that. There are so many of them that we get. But one that is most prominent in Nigeria is croaker fish. And we as an institute have tried to see how we can actually propagate croaker. But we are hitting the same brick wall we have with culturing of the prawn. I think very soon we should be able to get out of it. In the culture system, these are the array of fish species you can have for culture. There are so many of them. But in Nigeria, we limit ourselves to actually the ones you call catfish, tilapia, Chrysictis, Tapon atlanticus, Chana obscura. Those are fishes that are grown both in the fresh and the marine environment. Now, why it is pertinent for us to know is that most of the things I'm going to talk about here, by the time you cadets and seafarers go to sea, you will be our ambassadors and tell them that, no, you can't do this. Yes, you can do this. So that we can sustainably grow our fishery resources. The term sustainability has long been used by resource managers with reference to maximum harvesting of fisheries consistent with maintenance of constantly renewable stock. And in having that, you must have an integrated fisheries management system which requires strong policy implementation and a permanent audit system, which must be covered by monitoring, control, surveillance. I add the last one, enforcement. Enforcement is done both by the Federal Department of Fisheries and the Navy. The Navy. You see all this story I'm talking about here. If we don't have the collaboration, we don't have coast guards in Nigeria. If we don't have the collaboration in the Navy and for them to provide security in our maritime space, all these things will not work. And that's why you have dwindling fortunes coming from the fishery subsector because of insecurity. You'll find out there's a situation where you waste your time going to fish. The next thing you see one speedboat will park by your side and tell you to offload all your fish. The Navy people will understand what I'm Rector, you understand what I'm saying? Before they will come and move out your fish. But presently, I think the Navy has tried their utmost best to curb most of these security issues. And why I say this surveillance must be done nationwide and beyond, because whatever you're doing, so what they do, what the statistics say is that Nigeria imports a lot of fish, but sometimes these fishes move to our neighboring countries, packaged and come back into Nigeria as imported fish and at a higher premium. And that's what happens. So we need to have enforcers who will make sure that in the marine space, we can actually stop this IUU. And this will take the collective efforts of governments and all stakeholders. Now let me try and move faster. There's a problem in management, yes, we know. So we must have a clear understanding and appraisal of the national availability of resources, their potentials, rate at which resources could be exploited on a sustainable basis. That's why we have a research vessel which are manned by seafarers that take us to sea, where the scientists can do their work on fish stock assessment and other things in the marine space. But in the aquaculture space that I showed earlier and that happens on ground, we found out that we have 774 local governments. We don't have adequate statistics to know what we produce. Because I have gone to central Nigeria and I found out that I picked a little town called New Busa. New Busa, the amount of aquaculture-based fisheries that New Busa turns out is amazing. In the northeast, before the insecurity, if you go to a town called Baga, the quantity of fish that comes out of there that are processed is enormous. All those statistics we don't know because it's our artisanal fishermen who do all this work and are not accounted for in our sustainability process. So we need to strengthen that so we know what we do. But you know the surprising thing? Most of the fish that are caught all over the place, their central hub of distribution is from Onitsha. They move fish from the north, they move fish from the north central, they move fish from the northeast, from the south, the southwest, and they end up in Onitsha for distribution in sub-Sahara, sub-west in Africa, in Western Africa and beyond. Well, the problems and solutions for capture fisheries is that I mentioned it earlier on is overfishing, where you have a number of shrimping vessels that sweep our coast. But there are some solutions. That we established a 5 nautical mile non-trawling zone. You have a reduction in the overall size of the trawl net, bycatch reduction devices, third, and vessel monitoring systems. In another slide, I will tell you why the vessel monitoring system is important. Now, this is a thematic diagram of what you call a turtle extruder device. This is meant a turtle extruder device. Sorry. Okay. This is meant to exclude turtle from catch so that, turtle is endangered species. You don't just consume them. So this device, when the turtle hits here, they go back. So fish and shrimps and other things can pass through. It's not only in the marine space that you have turtle conservation, even on land. But I tell you, it's very hectic. In that Lagos axis, you have a lot of turtle safe havens. But you find out that when the turtles lay their eggs, the indigenous people come around and go and pick those eggs, they fry it, and they eat. You now ask them, why are you doing this? They tell them, say, Oga, no go chop. When the turtles come to a shore, they catch them and kill them. So we devised a method and said, okay, if you catch this turtle, bring it to us, we will pay you premium for the turtle. You know what happens? When we give them, they hang around the office area. Follow us to where we are going to release the turtle. And when you release the turtle, you'll be shocked that same turtle you release, they'll bring it tomorrow. So that you will pay them money again. We were also trying to conserve what you call the manatee, the sea cow. There's a village where they consume this manatee, but they are extinct. But what we did, we went to teach them fish farming so that do fish farming, we'll give you other incentives, and then you can leave this one and do as we say. For where? They didn't do that. The next time we went for inspection, without informing them, we got there and the next thing we said, no be manatee with this. He said, Oga, the fish just come, we just catch her. How we just come, we just catch her? Okay, release it back now, Oga, the hook, tear them out. But I told you there are ways you can treat fish that have injury by using normal salt to treat that injury. So that's for capture. But in culture, the problems stem from legislation, site location, acquisition of land, conflict with environmentalists, human rights groups, broodstock and feed production. Let me just talk about this and let me fly. Broodstock production. You know, it is no miracle that your father and your mother will not allow you to marry your cousin. You know that? Because genetics does not allow for that. If that happens, what I'm saying that is in the human kingdom happens in the animal kingdom. If that happens for the animal kingdom, you'll find out that what you find is a situation called inbreeding. Inbreeding occurs when genetic traits are passed from parents down to offspring. So let me give you a small example. In my family, there is madness, gene of madness. I now go and marry my cousin who has a recessive gene also for madness because it runs in the family, isn't it? So when we both get married and we have offspring, what happens? The whole generation is crazy. I use that as a small illustration of what genetics is talking about. So that's why we must be very careful here. It's just like also in farming, if you do not choose good parent stock, you end up having issues. Can I do a small demonstration? Am I permitted? Rector, am I permitted? Okay. I will use myself as an example. I'm the male fish. I'm trying to explain genetics, broodstock development, and the future. Madam, come. No disrespect to anybody. Madam, come. Please, don't be angry. Oga, can you stand up for me? Don't be angry. It's a demonstration. So I'm here. You stand with madam. Male, female. We are supposed to produce offspring. I'm not a preacher, so I didn't marry anybody. We are supposed to produce offspring. Now, you agree with me that if we produce offspring, what you will have is offspring that have length, but don't have breadth. But here, okay, should I continue? But here, you have both length and so when you go to the market to buy our offspring, which one will you buy? Because this one will you feed us from now till next year, we will not grow. Please sit down. Sorry, it's just a demonstration. I'm sorry. So we need also to be mindful of that. Come and help me. You see what I just demonstrated? Let me say this for the benefit of students. What I just demonstrated is genetics. It's a course I learned in the university. Shebi, they called me Dr. Kuki Abi. It's a course I did in the university and I failed it twice. So in the University of Calabar, then if you fail a core course for the third time, what happens to you? They rusticate you. So I was very lucky. The third time, I had to read and I passed. Now I'm making a mockery of genetics. So I also tell you, cadets and students, don't give up. You will fail, but if you have sense of purpose, hope, and faith, you will reach your promised land. Let me leave this preaching till when I get to careers. So let me fly with this. Now, there are crimes that are committed. Pardon me, Rector. There are crimes that are committed in the marine space. Surveillance avoidance. You know, earlier on I mentioned vehicle monitoring systems. Most of these vessels, when they get into our territorial waters, what do? They switch off the monitoring system so that you don't even know where they are and what they are doing. That is a crime. You have transshipment, where you do loading from vessel to vessel. Transshipment is legal because most of our operations in Nigeria, STS, is ship-to-ship transshipment. But when it's done without permission, it's illegal. You have abuse of vessel registries. The Navy will understand what I mean. Cadets, you will know later. Where you come up with a registration that you're coming from Ghana. That same vessel, when it gets to Nigeria, it changes flag states. It happens. But I know my rector will say it was in the past. Then you have licensing abuses and interaction between artisanal vessels and sister ships. Aha. So this is an illustration of what you will face when you're on board. Now look at this. unlicensed border hopping between two nations is not supposed to occur. Fishing non-permitted species is not supposed to occur. Fishing with illegal gear, not reporting catches, well, let me not say that story, which some ship captains do. They go to sea, they stay for 60, 90 days, they come back, they say, Oga, will not catch anything. Meanwhile, they are selling the fish to, they happen again. Oga. Now, you have, in fishing in prohibited areas, we have marine protected areas that you don't fish. So when you go on board, you should also know that you should know most of these things. Vessel with dual flags, I talked about that. Transferring fish without authorization. Vessel with false flags, fishing in our EEZ. Let me assume that here is from Lagos to Calabar. I hope you know we have a 200 nautical mile EEZ, which the federal government, we have gracefully been given another 20 nautical miles, which means we can sustainably exploit our fisheries resources. Well, we are starting with the ones in our 200 nautical miles before we enter the ones in our 20 nautical miles. So that 10 million jobs that they say is in the marine space is in the marine space if we actually do MCS and enforcement. Now, there are direct drivers of the aquatic ecosystem that impact on our biodiversity and fisheries. You have loss and degradation of habitats, destruction of wetlands. If you come to the Niger Delta area, we have a lot of wetlands. But these wetlands have been turned into jetties. Like you go to Lagos, you find out that they've constructed a co-Atlantic city. All those things hindered our fish breeding grounds. Because you know that fish that comes from the marine environment, most of them reproduce in the fresh water. And when in their cycle, they go back to marine water and grow, and that continues. You have ghost fishing. I hope you know what ghost fishing is. Ghost fishing is attributed to when you're trawling, sometimes you lose your trawling nets. Those trawling nets fall into the water, they are not retrieved. So those nets turn to aggregates where nutrients grew. So fish go there to feed and get entangled in the net. Shebi is a human being that is supposed to fish, but now it's ghosts that are catching fish. So that's why I have ghost fishing. Introduction of invasive species. This one happens when you have, I hope they must have taught you something on ballast water. Ballast water is when you use water to stabilize your ships, isn't it? Now, when you take water from Europe and you come into Nigeria, you know that sometimes you have to release that water. So when you release it, the species that are akin to that side are released into Nigerian territorial waters, and then there's competition between the different species. You'll find out, take for example, in Brazil, there's a fish called piranha. Piranha can eat, a school of piranha can devour a whole cow in less than 3 minutes. Now imagine if that species enters your ballast water and then you bring it into Nigeria. What happens? It will be free for all feast for them. Then you have domestic waste, oil pollution, climate change. Now let me talk about climate change. Let me talk about this before we go on. You have indirect drivers, demography, economy, cultural and religious drivers, then science and technology. But why I was hammering on climate change? Climate change, once this God-given sun rises more than 1 degree, 2 degrees centigrade in relation to the emission of carbon into the atmosphere, you'll find out that it affects not only fishing, every activity. Because I hope you know that breeding and delivery needs temperature to operate. It's temperature that actually allows us to grow. Single physical property, temperature. Because when the temperature is high, your feeding rate increases, isn't it? When temperature is low, your feeding rate decreases. And when temperature is high, breeding activities are hampered because it's an uncomfortable situation for the fish. Okay? Now, let me come to your space before I round up. There's a concept going around the country now that was instituted by the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. It's called the blue economy. I hope you know we have 3 other economies. You have the digital economy, you have the green economy, you have, well, some people like to add the black gold economy, and then the last one, which we have not started here, is called the silver economy. You know which one is silver economy? In some other climes, when people grow old, you know that old age sometimes does not hinder your faculty. So retired people are called back to come and be back-end officers in operations. And because of their silver head, they call it silver economy. Now, for the blue economy, if you look here, you have an array of activities of which you all are going to be a major part, are going to take a major part when you live here. Because marine transportation involves seafarers. Living resource exploitation, fishing, involves seafarers. Tourism and recreation, especially when you're on passenger vessels, involves seafarers. When you have marine construction, those who move the engineers to site are going to be the seafarers. Why I'm saying all this is to let you know that don't have a one-stop idea that careers are only in one direction. Let us improve your sensibility. There are computer operators that are at the back end that are monitoring all that is going on, especially when you come to power generation. And then this space that is supposed to be a 10 million job creation environment, and the future of us is staring us in the face. And the manpower I'm seeing here is what's going to drive this. Now, the ocean economy as it is, okay, I'm rounding up. The ocean economy as it is, you know that even on board vessels, you have even electrical engineers, all manner of people. Even you have physicists, you have chemists. It's a whole gamut of individuals working in this economic space that you are going to feel, because I'm closer to where I'm going to than where I'm coming from. Where you're coming from is still very recent, isn't it? Because once you cross 50, you're closer to where you're going to than where you're coming from. So we should be able to impact you with the knowledge to make you traverse this economy. We are all students here. We came with a clean slate on a journey of life to acquire what to make us eat in the future. Now, what do you need? Your degrees, your certification, and other things to make a difference. Do any of your lecturers know you? Are they favoring you in your exams? That is a disservice to you, because in the future, that act will hinder your ability to function in the open world. So, let tests and exams announce you, and you must choose wisely, especially friends. I hope you know that there are friends that are going to nowhere, and there are friends that are going somewhere. So follow who know road. Because these days you find out that our young people are engaging in things that are inimical to their growth. How can you explain seeing a young man at the bus stop like this? You know where I'm going to, huh? Eh? Like this. And he's sleeping. The normal convention is that when you're sleeping, you should be in bed. But most of our youths now stand at bus stops and they're like this. They've slept because of hallucinogens. Because we're on international TV, I won't call the local name. But you know it. And those hallucinogens have a way of tampering with your well-being. So please stay clear. So you must have a new purpose. Where are you? Why are you here? To obtain a degree and a skill set. Now, that skill set that you obtain should be what should propel you into the future. You must not stop. You must always improve your skill set. Do not always rely on what is taught to you in the classrooms alone. Seek knowledge as far as China. That is what I saw in China when I went. That was proposed by Prophet Muhammad in years past, not in 2001. Seek knowledge, which means you must constantly improve yourself so that you can improve your skill set. So that you can drive, you can be on board things like this and not go and smash people's harbor in Spain and Portugal. So that you can also, I was looking for a wet vessel to put, I couldn't see. So that you can also man fishing trawlers like this, and these are jobs of seafarers. Scientists will just jump on board and go and collect our samples. Or you can be on a research vessel. This is our own research vessel in Nyoma. It's our own research vessel in Nyoma. And we use it for scientific research. Most recently, we sailed from Lagos to your area here, and we went back. But we couldn't have done that without the help of the Nigerian Navy, because we might have ended up in Gabon or somewhere funny. But what I'm saying is that your skill set is needed in all this array of things I have mentioned. Now, in a fisheries institution, your certifications and your degrees and what you have can be in aquaculture, biological oceanography, physical and chemical, mariculture, fishing technology and safety, fishing technology, biotechnology, marine geology, fisheries resources, and marine meteorology. We need all your skill sets in all these areas. Because let me take physical and chemical, oceanography and biological. Most of the parameters we pick up are in the open sea. So we need you to take us there to go and get our parameters. And even in geology, where we do coring of the seabed, you'll find out that, I think I was in the simulation lab where they were telling me that you must have a vessel that you can stand in one place. The wave cannot move it, so that you can do your coring and get your samples at different depths. So if my ship captain cannot steady the vessel, what happens? I'm in trouble. I'll be giving false readings. Now, if you're a marine engineer, you have an array of areas you can work. Don't be limited to anything. Why I put, there's NIWA here, you have state water authorities, you can work anywhere. Your skill sets are needed almost in every endeavor. Shipyards, mobile offshore drilling units. You can be marine surveyors. There's a lot of money in being a marine surveyor. You go on board, you come down $5,000. Even you can go to hydro. Now, this is where I'm going to. You can be in the academia. When you have gotten all your skill sets, your seat time, and you're about to retire, while you are doing all those things, touring around the world and making money, there are online degrees and things you can do, so that by the time you're stepping down, you can fill our university, Maritime University. You can come back to Oron here and become lecturers. You can rise to the level of professors. My executive director, CEO, started like you. Rectors, am I right? He started like you. He was sitting in a chair like this. Today he's a professor handling one of the biggest research institutes in this country. Sorry. Let's leave. The nautical sciences, the same thing. I went to your simulation room. Lovely. But something is creeping up on us. Artificial intelligence. Who uses an iPhone here? I don't have. I'm a civil servant. Who has an iPhone? Now, if you tell your iPhone, Siri, call me my girl, Siri will say, I do not understand that command, because you did not program girl into the phone. But when you say, Siri, call me my wife, Siri, you say, calling wifey. That's artificial intelligence. It's creeping in on us gradually. And we must improve our skill set to meet the future. It's not only for students, so it's even for we that lecture. Sorry, I'll round up very soon. Let me just, now. So, very soon, there will be AI-enabled ships that will not be unmanned. You see that your simulator you have there? From those your simulators, something like that, that is where these vessels will be controlled. So which means these are skill sets of the future. And you must always be prepared, because there's going to be superior autopilot and navigation control systems. There's going to be supply chain transformations. So you must be ready for what is coming. Then in fishing, it's going to be precision fishing that is smart. So if we are looking for tuna and we deploy, it's only tuna we'll catch. If we are looking for grunter and we deploy, it's only grunter we will catch. If we are looking for sardinella and it's only sardinella we'll catch, that is smart fishing. Not this bobo ero we are doing. Sorry, pardon my grammar. This one we are doing now is going to be smart very soon. Now, what do? You must stay up to date with latest technology. You must stay current in your area of expertise or core competence. You must maintain relevance in your field. You must be relevant. I won't be standing here today talking to you if I'm not relevant in my field. Nobody will look for me. So once you are cast or cemented in your skill set, everyone will be looking for you everywhere you go. Well, in summary, the grammar too plenty, but in summary, fisheries is important, manpower development is important, technological breakthrough is important, and if you keep faith with what you want to do, if you keep faith with your beliefs that I can surmount, Nigeria is hard, I don't argue with you. But let me tell you something, knock on the door until the door opens. I finished my master's degree in 2000. For 4 years with the master's degree, I was roaming the streets. But I told myself I will work in Nigerian Institute for Oceanography and Marine Research. Every 3 months, I was at the doorstep of the then executive director. He was tired of seeing my face, and then he employed me. So, you must always knock on the door, seek, and you shall find. Knock, and the door will be open. Seek knowledge as far as China. God bless you all.
You can put those hands together. Put those beautiful hands together. Put those beautiful hands together. Thank you. That was Dr. Thank you very much. Beyond the impact on aquatic biodiversity and fishery resources, Our guest speaker has also highlighted the various problems and solutions in the fishery industry. One more time, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please, let's appreciate one more time that guest speaker for this paper presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you. We will now open the floor for questions and answers. Please, if you have any question, just 3 questions will be entertained. Cadets, the floor is now open. If you have any question, I saw you all writing and taking notes, so it's now time for you to please ask your questions. Dr. Abiodun is here on standby to respond to your question, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Please, a resounding applause for the rector, please.
Stay there. Well, our distinguished guests, my excellent members of staff, erudite cadets, I really enjoyed Professor Sule's lecture or presentation, and my friend the doctor did a fantastic job. In fact, when they stopped talking, I actually felt he should have continued. So I'm surprised they're not asking questions. So why? You don't have any questions? Or you are shy? What can be the problem? Okay, you standing, what is IUU? You don't know? I hope you know that the world is watching you, even your I don't want to use the other word, but you know who I'm talking about. She's watching. I think you see they're laughing because they know what I'm talking about. So gentlemen, what is the issue? Is it that you don't want to ask questions or you understand everything? Anyway, I enjoyed everything he said because this is something I have witnessed myself. When I was a cadet, I was opportuned to know that there was a joint operation between the Navy and Neoma. And I was wondering how some of our colleagues, senior colleagues, were sent on joint patrols with them to prevent poaching, illegal fishing. And like he said, most of the fish we eat here belong to us, but they are imported. Bigger vessels, they come from China and some other areas. They are factory fitted. They catch our fish, process them on board, go to Cotonou, berth, offload. A lot of warehouses are there. Those fish there, they are not for Cotonou people or those from Benin. It's for Nigerian market. Imagine warehouses, plenty. But our people will go there, or they go board and go buy fish. It's our fish. So they don't have the power to enforce. They can only tell us what to do. And the military, sorry, not the military, the Navy, let me use the Navy now. Let's come down to that level. And NIMASA, they are doing their best to support their operations. It is true, we have an EEZ of about 200 nautical miles, which has been extended now to about 250 to be precise by the United Nations UNCLOS, Law of the Sea. But then, it is international waters. If you don't have eyes there, how do you know what they do there? It's a very wide space. I have caught people, I've arrested Nigerian vessels carrying out illegalities in my time in the Navy. I remember there was a time, you know, you've seen the radar at the simulation center. Yeah, I saw two objects painting, that's the word, at night. And I kept watching until they became one. What it meant was that the two vessels have come alongside and they're now together. And I told my team, my crew, switch off all the lights of our own ship so that will not be sighted. By the time we got close, very close, they didn't notice us. So at night, then we switch on our lights at the same time. We saw them transferring fish from the fishing trawler to very big boats. And I said, look, video these people. We did. I interviewed the captain. I said, tomorrow you go back and report to your people that pirates hijacked your fish or you didn't catch any fish, like our excellent guest lecturer just said in his talk, in his presentation. So these things are real. So I want you guys to take this thing seriously because, like he said, you guys are going to end up everywhere. Some of you become port administrators, some of you become captains of ship. This is the time to know the kind of things you expect to see in future. So I cannot thank our resource person enough, but I'll just say God bless you. I don't know the name of that lady. There was a stakeholders forum at Abuja. Is it Abuja or Lagos? Lagos or Abuja, where somebody from Myanmar came to give us a presentation. Lagos. I've forgotten her name, but just like you, I didn't want her to stop talking. So when she finished, I told my essay, look, these people must come here and talk to us. The only aspect you didn't talk about, which I believe you will talk about later, people here too, they are business inclined. They may want to open backyard, fish tanks, where they can do some fish farming and make some little money. I know some of my staff do it, but I think Mr. Tunde was doing that some time ago. But this is something everybody can really do with some little education. So find time to send somebody here to talk to them before the year runs out. We'll be responsible for the person's flight. Come and educate us, because you must find a way to, balance the act to survive. Thank you very much, sir. We are very grateful.
Thank you so much. You will all agree with me that the rector is very much vast and experienced in shipping related matters, and we are all very fortunate to have him in our midst every time we have an opportunity to get enlightened in this field of endeavor. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, please. One more time, let's appreciate the rector. Thank you. I would like to crave the indulgence and the permission of the rector to invite to the podium for the second paper presentation for today. Ladies and gentlemen, it's no other than Dr. Emeka Akabogu. With the resounding applause, please invite with me to the podium the second speaker for today's paper presentation. Thank you.
Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, cadets, to present the next lecture is no other person but Dr. Emeka Akabogu, Esquire. He is a commercial lawyer with specialist interest in maritime, energy, and international trade law. He is a senior partner at the law firm Akabogu and Associates, which is active in shipping, maritime, petroleum, and international trade representation. As a litigator and arbitrator, he uniquely combines his legal skills with an in-depth understanding of markets and operations in the shipping and petroleum sectors. His practical experience spans consulting, legal representation in both disputes and transactions, wide-ranging capacity development, major academic contribution in his field, and pioneering business, promotional, and industry engagement initiatives. He is instrumental to many significant legal instruments in the Nigerian maritime industry, including the Coastal and Inland Shipping Act, Cabotage 2003, which he played active role in the preparation of the first draft as a sub-consultant to the House Committee on Maritime Transport. He also played active role in the development of the Marine Environmental Management Regulation 2012, drafted all 12 current regulations for marine environment management in Nigeria. He contributed to the development of the Nigerian Stevedoring Regulation 2014 and the draft Nigerian Ship Detention Regulation 2021. He has represented and continues to represent a diverse range of clients across multidisciplinary and specialist areas of law, achieving landmark successes and considerable commercial benefits for clients. He has also anchored crucial capacity development initiatives in the Nigerian maritime and petroleum sectors and trained thousands of operators and practitioners on markets, operation, policies, and laws. Dr. Akabogu graduated from the University of Lagos in 1998 and was called to the Nigerian bar in 2000. He holds a master's degree in law from the University College London in 2003, a Magister Juris from the IMO International Maritime Law Institute Malta in 2016, and a doctorate degree also from the Institute of Maritime Law from the International Maritime Law Institute Malta. He holds his doctorate degree is the first African in the history of Institute of Maritime Law International. As a British Chevening alumnus, he is the co-editor of the Nigerian Shipping Cases, which is Nigeria's pioneer, longest-running, and widely reputed compilation of case reports for shipping and maritime law. He is also the editor of the Journal of Contemporary Nigerian Admiralty Law and publisher of Marine and Petroleum Nigeria. He is the author of two major industry texts, Maritime Cabotage in Nigeria and Ship Arrests in Nigeria. He is the Executive Vice Chairman of the OTL Downstream Development in Africa, a Pan-African initiative for the promotion of downstream petroleum business and policy that organizes Africa's biggest downstream petroleum forum, OTL Africa Downstream. He is also the founder and convener of the Nigeria International Maritime Summit, which aggregates all operators and professionals in Nigeria's maritime industry. Dr. Akabogu is a recipient of numerous industry awards of excellence. He is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Shipping and a member of the Nigerian Bar Association, Maritime Arbitrators Association of Nigeria, Nigeria Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and the Energy Institute. He is also a member of the Board of Governors of the Center for Petroleum Information and currently serves on the Executive Council of the Nigerian Maritime Law Association as Honorary Secretary. Deploying his skills and resources, Dr. Akabogu undertakes a considerable amount of pro bono services in aid of indigent persons in pretrial custody who are unable to afford legal services. As a result, he has a passion for justice sector reform towards speedy administration of criminal justice. He is also a strong interest in socio-economic development through the facilitation of efficient transport and infrastructure development initiatives. Ladies and gentlemen, standing to present the next lecture is Dr. Emeka Akabogu.
Thank you very much for that long introduction. If I knew it was going to be that long and was going to be read, would I have just sent a short paragraph. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I first of all want to appreciate the rector for extending this very important and well appreciated invitation to me to come to the school. I was telling him that the last time I was here was in 2005. And since then, and coming today, it is a whole new school. There was a school then, but this is something completely different. And I appreciate the 1 hour plus which we had that the registrar took us on the tour of the facilities. And the question that kept ringing through my mind as we toured the facility was, the outside world doesn't know half of what is going on here. As I said to the registrar, the Maritime Academy of Nigeria, ORON, is a national asset and should be so regarded. In the Committee of Educational Institutions and Wealth Creating Opportunities for the country, this is an asset. So thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you also to the management, rest of the management and staff of the school. It is my pleasure to be here. The only thing is that my brother has done a very good job in his first presentation, which for me has ensured I have very little work to do in the course of my presentation. But mine is slightly different. I'm going to be speaking on sustainable shipping development and the role of law and policy. So it's a more general topic, and hopefully it will be also much shorter. Now, my engagements, when we talk of sustainable development, it is a very common topic, at least in development sectors, and it also colloquially used widely, sometimes correctly and sometimes not correctly. But essentially, it is the core of my discussion today, because it is not all the time that you have a reference to sustainable shipping development, which was the topic that was crafted by the rector when it was sent to me. And I found it interesting, sustainable shipping development. So, but to be able to understand that topic, we need to unbundle sustainable development and decouple it from shipping development. Because these are two important concepts. They are two separate but important concepts. Sustainable development within the context of the global economy and the global socio-economic order, and shipping development within the context of our interest, which is the maritime industry. So first of all, sustainable development. Now, the concept of sustainable development is one which has always existed colloquially, but as a concept of study and as an area where deliberate action has been taken, it is one which really arose in the course of the last 40 to 50 years. In fact, it was not until 1987 that the very first deliberate efforts towards developing the concept was actualized. And that was when the United Nations empaneled the World Commission on Environment and Development, which was known at that time as the Brundtland Commission. And the essence of this commission was to review activities across social and economic sectors to come up with something that would protect the environment, because it was felt that the environment was suffering from the continued activity of mankind. That commission, in submitting its report to the United Nations, advocated a balance between social development, economic development, and environmental preservation. And it is these three important ideas that are at the heart of sustainable development. So when we talk about economic development, environmental development, and social development, put together, they go into the scheme of concepts that drive sustainable development. And essentially, the idea behind sustainable development is to ensure that in undertaking human activity, the focus is not solely on optimizing economic value nor social value, but that environmental concerns should be integrated such that as we live for today, we're also able to leave something for tomorrow. So that's the core of the concept of sustainable development. Following that 1987 submission and increasing advocacy on the subject, at about 2 decades later, in 2016, these objectives of integrating social, economic, and environmental considerations into all human activity was further refined into the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, which is a charter of development by which most countries of the world now anchor or measure the success of their efforts. So I wouldn't be going too further into that concept, because I think the foundation I've just laid suffices from the point of view of understanding sustainable development. We'll probably come back there just briefly in the course of my discussion, just to identify one or two more specific components that relate to the maritime industry. Then there is the separate concepts of shipping development, which probably we are more familiar with. And shipping development essentially is the combination of efforts. Again, it is not something that conduces to one specific definition. Rather, it is the combination of efforts to attain availability, accessibility, efficiency, and effective administration of shipping. So that essentially is the concept of shipping development. And that is why in an organization like NEMASA, for instance, among the departments that they have a department of shipping development. So shipping development focused on those points which I've made, which is ensuring availability, accessibility, efficiency, and effective administration of shipping. But when I talk about these concepts of availability, accessibility, and efficiency, what precisely are we talking about? You will see that when we talk about availability of ships and shipping services towards shipping development, we are talking about that core component, that core assets, that core infrastructure without which shipping really will not move, and that is ships. Ships need to be available, and the efforts towards making ships available for ensuring ease of movement, for ensuring that that component of the economy of a national life is operating effectively, is the subject of availability. So, separates from accessibility. With regard to accessibility, we are talking about accessibility of ships to services which are related to ships, and accessibility of stakeholders, accessibility of the market to these interfaces that facilitate shipping. So we're talking of services related to ships and ports, services which facilitate interconnectivity, such that even though the coastal nations or coastal communities are in the minority, the access which those communities in the hinterlands have to the coastal communities and coastal areas through which the interfaces of the ports are available are key in ensuring that the shipping operations are continually developed. Because if you think about it, majority of citizens globally live outside the coastline. So if you take the world population, majority of people do not live, even though significant parts of the world live in cities which are along the coast, but the larger part of the population live in the hinterland. Yet, they are in need of shipping services because they need cargo shipped to these communities. They need services which are facilitated by ships brought to these communities. So at the end of the day, accessibility to shipping services is as important for those of them who are in the coastal communities as it is for those who are in the hinterland. So that's the second point on accessibility. Then there's efficiency as another factor of shipping development. Now, efficiency in my analysis relates to achieving ease of operational, commercial, and administrative procedures which relate to the outcomes which are of value in the entire shipping value chain. So, if we are talking about a port, we want for the port to be accessible and for the port to be effective in its services to both the ships and to the users of the ports have to be efficient, which means that the port has to have administrative procedures where the process is optimized and the outcomes are readily known. So efficiency is the third component of shipping development, which anchors the discussions which we'll be having in the course of the day. And the fourth and final component of shipping development for us is effective administration. In the course of the last presentation, at the end of the last presentation, the speaker dwelt on the importance of a well-rounded development of all the cadets who are in this school, because your work and your involvement within the maritime industry, within the world economy, will not be limited to going on board ships. And that is very, very true. In fact, chances are that there may be more, as at today, there may be more opportunity in Nigeria outside the ships than there are on board ships. For Nigeria, there's obviously opportunity globally, but in Nigeria, you probably find more opportunities, and I dare say sometimes probably even better opportunities outside the ships, because these opportunities are available and they are looking for persons who are schooled and who understand the dynamics of the operations of the maritime industry. And I assure you, as someone who every now and then is in need of such talent, there are not many out there. So it's important from the point of view of effective administration that we are able to ensure that within the scheme of shipping development that it is available. And here we're simply looking at a framework of governance to ensure smooth interrelationship between diverse parts of the system. So that's for shipping development. But the subject of my discussion is sustainable shipping development. So we've laid the foundations for sustainable development and shipping development. But sustainable shipping development then, what does it mean? For me, essentially it is about the application of the principles of sustainable development to shipping development. It's as straightforward as that. So the principles of sustainable development, which we had articulated earlier, which are founded on integrating the application of economic, social, and environmental considerations into our everyday daily undertakings as individuals, as corporate organizations, and as factors within the broad socioeconomic value chain. Now, within the context of sustainable shipping development, I've said it, application of the principles of sustainable development to shipping development. Now, it's in this regard that I want to make probably lay more emphasis on some components of the sustainable development goals which I mentioned earlier. A range of them, but the ones which have been identified here are important to us to the extent that they specifically speak to, not directly, but generally and notionally to those of us in the maritime industry. So goal 7 relates to affordable and clean energy. And we're already familiar with the fact that availability of energy has a lot to do with the maritime industry. Whether it is from the very clean and sustainable components of wind energy, which we were discussing about earlier in the day, to application of hydrocarbons, which for us is of concern. So, in Nigeria is a hydrocarbon-dependent country. Not very far from us here in Oron, we have fields in Eket, and we have fields across other parts of the south of Nigeria, which drive our economy. So the petroleum and oil and gas industry is core to our sustenance as a country. And the translation of the petroleum industry largely, in fact, as of today in Nigeria, is largely anchored on the maritime industry. Because time was when a lot of the oil and gas which Nigeria puts into the global market was sourced from onshore facilities. However, in the last 20 or 30, 25 years, increasingly, a lot of Nigeria's oil and gas production has moved offshore. And because it has moved offshore, we do know that all offshore activity requires the application of principles, knowledge, and skills relating to the maritime industry. The maritime, it is regulated by the maritime industry. It is operated by people who are in ships, who are familiar with ships, and people who service these important components. So that is why Goal 7 of the SDGs, affordable and clean energy, is lock in step with the aspirations of the maritime industry as a whole. Goal 8 is on decent work and economic development. Again, that is as important because, as has been said, all of us here in the hall today desire that as we graduate and as we go into the world, that we go into a world that is ready for us, a world that accepts us, and a world that offers us everything which we desire for. And one of the most basic desires of any human being is that of decent work. Decent work is really what it means. Work which is decent. Work which doesn't humiliate one. Work which is honorable. And within the maritime industry, we've had efforts to facilitate decent work for the industry. The Maritime Labour Convention was passed in 2006, and the Maritime Labour Convention was directly purposed towards improving the welfare and the working conditions of those who are on board ships and those who work generally within the maritime industry. So that speaks to Goal 8 of the Sustainable Development Goals in the context in which we're talking about. But beyond decent work, it talks of economic development, which again speaks and is in tandem with the point I had made earlier, particularly as it relates to broad economic development and development within the principles of availability, accessibility, and efficiency, which I had articulated earlier. Goal 12 goes to responsible consumption and production. So, we want to consume responsibly. We want to be able to consume what we produce. We want to produce responsibly. We want the environment to remain effective and sustainable. We want to ensure that when we go out into the oceans, that the fish, which we spoke about so much in the course of the day, is available for us. We have seen the severe impacts of spills on the fishing environment in the environments where it has happened. These are things we don't want to see regularly. Those in the Ogoni land have experienced it. Those who have experienced, I think the last major spill we had in Nigeria, I think we've been lucky that in the recent time we've not had major oil spills. We have occasional spills which are contained, but we've not had major oil spills. The last major oil spill we had in Nigeria was about 20, 25 odd years ago, and that was a mobile facility which caused significant damage to to fishing communities in those areas. So Goal 12 goes to ensuring that in undertaking work within the shipping industry, it is undertaken with the mind that today is important, but tomorrow is more important. Because tomorrow inheres value both for us who are here today and for those who are coming tomorrow. Climate action is Goal 13. Climate action, again, is lock in step with a number of the initiatives which we find that condescend on maritime industry operations. So we hear a lot about desulfurization of ships and desulfurization mandates, which are spreading worldwide. And in fact, if you go to Europe, desulfurization mandates are compulsory across the European Union. They are not yet compulsory within Africa, but whether we like it or not, we're getting to the point where we will have to find ourselves abiding by some of these mandates. And that is because we source our vessels from outside the country. We source a lot of our finance from outside the country. Even if we're getting finance from local banks get funding and support financing from European institutions. And one of the things you find in many of these transactions these days is that the global financial institutions are no longer willing to provide finance for facilities that are either 100% hydrocarbon based or where it involves shipping for shipping which is not obeying current desulfurization mandates which you have. So to that extent, we are caught within this within that requirements, and we need to meet those mandates. If I may digress a bit, we also are talking a lot about achieving cleaner energy within the context of our oil and gas industry. And in achieving cleaner energy, one of the global advocacy points has been that countries that are involved in production of hydrocarbon need to begin winding down on those operations, because for some countries, the target of 2040 has been set for the total eradication of any form of hydrocarbons in the energy value chain. And that is why some of these countries are focused solely on renewables, Some of them are looking at alternatives which have minimal involvement of hydrocarbons. Again, for us in Africa and in Nigeria, we are probably not at that point yet because we are still largely dependent on resources, funding, job opportunities arising from that same industry. So our challenge is to have a way to seamlessly integrate the workings and the mandates of the hydrocarbon reduction within the context of our own operations in the country. So what I've tried to do is to set out the key components which define sustainable shipping development. And following that, the next will be to define the extent to which the achievement of these components of sustainable shipping development can lock in within our desires and our framework as Nigeria. And in that regard, we want to look at the policy and legal framework which we have in Nigeria, upon which this sustainable shipping development goals can be achieved. It's useful to, first of all, give an indication of the global context within which the policies and laws that we operate in the Nigerian maritime industry work as far as they relate to sustainable development. And I simply want to mention these important anchors of the global maritime jurisprudence. So the International Maritime Organization sets out a number of conventions, quite a number of them, but within the discussions that we're having, the Safety of Life at Sea Convention, which is a convention that speaks to the importance of procedures and assets and devices on board vessels that optimize safety of life. Same with the Convention on Prevention of International Convention on Prevention of Pollution, which is the MAPO, which again speaks to ensuring that in the operations of ships and in the classification of ships, that the marine environment is core to the considerations which are given in making decisions. These conventions go to the heart of sustainable development as far as the International Maritime Organization is concerned. And these conventions go to understandings which must be in place by seafarers and those who will be going on board ships for the purpose of being certified in the global certification systems which are required under STCW, and of course in the workings of the International Labour Organization as it relates to the maritime industry. So these conventions are, if I may call it, global, broad global canvases upon which Nigerian law is founded. I will not be speaking law too much today, but it is important nonetheless that we identify the key laws which anchor Nigeria's operations for its shipping industry, and the key laws and the relationship of these laws to policies which the country is driving. So Nigeria has a number of laws which speak to the sustainable shipping development. But to what extent is it able to speak to the achievement of sustainable shipping development in the light that we have set out? Before I go into the laws in detail, I want us to understand at a very, very basic level what is the law, and also at a very basic level what is policy. And that understanding is key to our discussions in the course of the day, because what is law eventually would help us to understand if we have laws which go to the foundations of the sustainable shipping environments that we desire. Now, law is very simple. Law is a set of rules and regulations which define how we should act. That's it. A set of binding and enforceable rules with penalties for violation. That is what is law is. But then, inherent in the concept of law is a concept called the rule of law, which essentially is that there is an understanding that the law is supreme, and it is the foundation for order and the ultimate arbiter in the interpretation of human actions. So of course it presupposes the existence of lawmakers, law implementers, then of course it presupposes law compliance and law enforcement. So that is the relevance of law. One, a set of rules. Two, an idea that these sets of rules which we have made for ourselves need to be complied with and must be complied with. On the other part, what is policy? Policy is a course of action proposed and applied by governments across a range of decision-making organs for the purpose of achieving set goals and objectives. So you can see policy is broader, it is loose, it is more amorphous, and while being nuanced, comparative to law, which is more precise. Now, within the context of the maritime industry, the legal framework which drives the maritime industry is anchored on laws, specific laws. So, you have the NEMASA Act, passed in 2007, which was preceded by the NMA Act. The good thing about the NEMASA Act, from a Maritime Academy of Nigeria perspective, is that the NEMASA Act created a foundation for proper funding of the Maritime Academy of Nigeria. We have an MPA Act which governs the ports and all activities and operations which relate to technical operations in the ports. We have the Shippers Council Act. We have a Cabotage Act. Now, what is important is these laws and these regulations and the regulations following these laws are the foundation upon which most of the activities which are undertaken are founded. So if we are required to comply with the requirements of other IMO conventions, then it is important that we domesticate these conventions, and a number of these conventions have been domesticated in Nigeria, and it is by virtue of their domestication that they become laws which need to be complied with by operators. So whether we are talking about laws relating to control of the discharges into the waters, or we're talking about laws relating to when and how vessels should be boarded, laws relating even to how navigation should occur, because many of us may know in the course of our studies that even your rules relating to port side, starboard, and how navigation should occur are rules which have already been incorporated into the laws, like the Merchant Shipping Act. So the Merchant Shipping Act has what is called the collision regulations, from which many of these rules come out. But the point of these laws, within the context of our discussion, is to achieve economic development, an economic development which has integrated concerns for the environment. And that is the point which is speaking to the topic of discussion for this afternoon. So, in this context, I wanted to propose, or I wanted to assert, rather, that the question exists: to what extent is Nigeria's current consistent with the needs of and desires and mandates of sustainable shipping development. That is the core of our discussion today, and that is speaking to our discussion. To what extent is sustainable shipping development achievable within the context of the laws which we have in Nigeria and the maritime policies which we have in Nigeria? Number one, for the laws we have in Nigeria, largely these laws are laws which are of a technical regulation point, which come from a technical regulation point of view, from an operational point of view, and to some extent, but not adequate enough, commercial point of view. These are what are the drivers of these laws. So what is more important really should be policy. And the question is, what policy drives Nigeria's maritime industry? What are the policies that drive Nigeria's maritime industry? In the last 25 years, we've not had any major, we've not had many major maritime policies. In fact, we've not had one wholesome maritime policy for the country in the last 25 years. The last time the country attempted an effort towards achieving a maritime policy that is wholesome was under what was then known as the National Shipping Policy Act. And that act was the act that gave birth to the former National Maritime Authority, which is now NIMASA. And the core of that policy was that Nigeria was interested in ensuring that cargo which is coming to Nigeria and cargo which is destined from different parts of the globe to Nigeria is carried by Nigerian interests. Nigeria wanted to gain wealth, to gain knowledge, wealth, and value from its cargo. And that policy was a policy that was based on the United Nations Convention on Trade and Development requirements of having a ratio of 40-40-20 on carriage in favor of countries that are the origins of the cargo. But that policy failed, and I don't want to go into that at all. But since then, the only policies which we've had for the industry that have been of any consequence are the cabotage policy and the port concessions policy. The cabotage policy was a policy which was based on the need to ensure that all the shipping activities which are undertaken within the Nigerian confines create value for Nigerians. That was the essence of that policy. So from a policy point of view, that advocacy was pushed, and it was not just a policy, but it was made a law in the form of the Coastal and Inland Shipping Cabotage Act, which was passed in 2003. In 2005, the country initiated port concessions as a policy to deliberately remove the operation of ports in Nigeria from the hands of the government and place it in the hands of the private sector in such a way that the efficiency of the operations will be optimized. However, that particular policy did not have any legal backing. How effective have these laws been? How effective have these policies been? Unfortunately, the Cabotage Act has not been successful, even though it was codified into a law. And my thesis on why it has not been successful is because Nigeria has not had a wholesome, end-to-end, all-encompassing shipping policy for the country. Because if you look at some of the concerns, some of the reasons why the Cabotage Act has not been successful, you will find that they condescend on lack of cooperation across the entire value chain of government. So, while some parts of government or some agencies of government are interested in cabotage being effectively implemented, some other agencies are not as keen on it being effectively implemented. And where the agencies who are all necessary parties to the success of the cabotage regime do not work together, then necessarily you will find that the efficiency of that policy can only go so far. So, and a typical example is one which many operators who are in the industry are familiar with, which is NMPC, for instance, not being in a position to give allocations to vessels which are cabotage vessels. Sorry, I've gone past this. So I was talking about a number of these policies. NMPC not been very keen on giving primacy to vessels which are cabotage vessels, knowing that NMPC has access to a large part of the valuable cargo that cabotage vessels need to use in order to be able to run their operations. And if we did have a shipping policy which is wholesome and which ensures that each component of government is able, in fact, each component of government must implement in the course of its operations, in the course of its decision making, then we probably would have had something different. We probably would have had a situation where a lot of value would have been added by cabotage, because cabotage vessels, people who had invested money in cabotage vessels, would have seen themselves operating regularly because they would have had a lot of cargo from NMPC, number one. Number two, they would have been able to pay back the loads that they took, and they would have been able to reinvest in expanding the fleet. Don't forget that one of the components of sustainable development we mentioned earlier was availability of vessels, which speaks to fleet development. But you can't develop fleets where you don't have cargo. And where you have a policy which is a policy that should encourage availability of cargo and consequent availability of vessels, and that policy is not implemented across government points, then it becomes more difficult for that to work. Another area where we see these conflicts relates to the various conflicts we see even within agencies of the same ministry, between NIMASA and MPA, between MPA and the Shippers Council, between the Shippers Council and MPA, and it's a whole vicious cycle. So again, these conflicts speak to absence of a wholesome policy that should drive the entire shipping industry. So you can't achieve sustainable shipping development. The point which I'm making is that you can't attain sustainable shipping development where you have suboptimal adherence to laws like we have in the cabotage law, or to policies. But then, where you have policies within the same industry which are in conflict, then it is a foundation for anarchy and ineffectiveness. My final thesis, but before I come to that, my final thesis will focus on this important point of ensuring a wholesome shipping policy for the entire value chain of the shipping industry. And that is a policy which must be put in place through the collaboration of stakeholders and the government. Once we have it, and it is a policy which is effective enough, covers the ground, then we would have laid the foundation. Because one of the things we find is that even from the point of view of outcomes which we are looking for, from the laws which we have, from the policies which we have, we don't see any outcomes that are positive enough to give us the confidence that in the next 25 years, for instance, the Nigerian shipping industry will get to a particular point in time, a particular stage that we desire. If you look at the statistics from the National Bureau of Statistics, for instance, it gives it says that the contribution of the maritime industry, I don't know, does anyone know the contribution of the maritime industry to GDP? Does anyone know what the contribution of the maritime industry in Nigeria to the national GDP is? Someone raised his hand at the back. Okay. Does anyone know what the contribution of the Nigerian entertainment industry to the GDP is? Nollywood. The contribution of Nollywood, as far as the National Bureau of Statistics goes, to national GDP is much more than the contribution of the maritime industry is. So, Nollywood, with all the skits we watch on our phones every day, all the videos, all the music of all the people that we follow, Nollywood is said to contribute up to 5%, between 5 to 7.5% to GDP. The maritime industry is said to contribute 0.01% to GDP. If that is the case, that doesn't sound very encouraging. But my suspicion is that that data from the National Bureau of Statistics is because there's only so much data that they can find. There's only so much which is available because the maritime industry and operators in the maritime industry have not fully optimized the value and created the visibility and generated the data which can be relied upon by the National Bureau of Statistics in effectively locating this industry. And because we have because MBS has profiled the maritime industry the way it has, it limits the opportunities for investment in the industry. So, again, a maritime policy should focus on identifying these components of data to ensure greater visibility of the industry within the context of the larger economy. Economic benefits to key operators need to become much more visible. In fact, if you look at in every maritime industry across the globe, even though there are many professions, there are many operators, but the ones that are most visible, the ones that are the drivers, are usually the ship owners, the seafarers, the port operators, the terminal operators, because maritime largely is about ships and ports. Ships and ports, essentially. Every other thing revolves around the ships and ports. In Nigeria, typically, your typical Nigerian ship owner is always complaining. And they are complaining because they do not feel they are getting value. Seafarers are complaining. I know how many times, even though I'm a lawyer, I know how many times I have situations where seafarers come to my office looking for work and looking to be directed to where to find work. And that is because the economy within which they want to operate is not being optimized. The only ones that appear successful are the port operators, the terminal owners. And that is because, well, rather, the question should be, at what expense are they successful? At whose cost are they successful? And you find that within that environment, there's a lot of inefficiency, and inefficiency creates value for some people. So to stem this tide of lack of visibility, of non-optimization, is important. The foundation is having a wholesome maritime policy for the country. And to the extent that Nigeria does not have a wholesome end-to-end maritime policy, then to that extent, there's only so much value it can garner for the shipping industry. And to that extent, sustainable shipping development, as has been thrust upon me to speak on today, will be limited. So, in conclusion, my recommendation will be I'll recommend to in fact, if I were the Minister of Marine and Blue Economy, at the time I was appointed, I would have set some targets for myself. One of the primary targets I would have set for myself would have been using this benchmark of 0.01% of the contribution of the maritime industry to the GDP. I would have told myself that, looking at this industry, I know that maritime industry can do much more than this. And the target would have been that within a period of maximum of 4 to 5 years, empirically followed on a year-on-year basis, that number should increase from 0.01% to between 5% and 7.5%. If that is done, and targets are set across the sub-components of the maritime industry, then we'll begin to see some movements. So my recommendations would be, number one, the ministry, if it hasn't done so yet, should commission an end-to-end national shipping policy to provide a comprehensive framework for the attainment of sustainable shipping development. We should codify policies which are not backed by law to ensure clarity and enforceability in the shipping sector. Then we should integrate itinerant policies into a consistent body of policies to enhance the impact of shipping regulations and practices. We should focus on enhancing data collection and indicators to measure the shipping industry and growth effectively, and to ensure economic benefits are visible to key operators. And finally, we should promote adherence to the rule of law in the implementation of maritime laws to improve compliance and governance. Thank you very much for listening. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dr. Emeka Akabogu. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, please. Let's applaud him some more. Thank you. I'd like to quickly request the cadets to take advantage of this section and ask any question relating to the topics under discussion for today's paper presentation. Please, the floor is now open. Cadets? For the two paper presentation, please, you are to ask your questions now. The floor is open. Okay. Please, I will request that the mic be given to the hand that is lifted up there, on my far left. Please introduce yourself and air your question, please. Thank you.
My name is Isaac Job. I write for the Daily Sun newspaper. I'm not a cadet. My question goes to the last speaker. Thank God he's a lawyer, one of the key actors in the maritime sector. That's a NIMASA. My question is this. As a lawyer and administrator in the NIMASA, what are the laws that you consider necessary for review? Because the National Law Commission, Nigerian Law Commission, one of the duties is to review the laws. What inputs have you done to the Law Reform Commission to ensure some of those laws in the maritime sectors are reviewed? Number one. Number two, some of the policies, like the cabotage policy, you said have failed due to the implementation. What have you done in this regard? Thank you.
Please, you may respond to the question.
Okay, thank you. Point of correction. I am not with the massa. I am a private practicing lawyer. So maybe if you thought I was in massa, you may not have asked the question. But I may still propose an answer. So you asked, what are the laws that need to be
Reviewed.
I think more than review is actually implementation. If you listen to what I was saying, the cabotage has failed despite being a policy that was codified. The cabotage is supposed to be of value to Nigeria, but is not implemented because across the key agencies of government that need to work together, they are not working together. And they're not working together because an end-to-end government decision on cabotage as a policy for the Nigerian economy has not been made. And to that extent, you will keep having organizations, agencies working at cross purposes. So, if you have a policy which is made, and then you have better fidelity to the rule of law, by which I mean laws which have been made, simply comply. And if there is non-compliance, law enforcement must take steps which have been set out in the law against those who do not comply. Then things will happen. But in terms of review, to tell you the truth, we have a very good Merchant Shipping Act which covers technicalities of ship operations, which is consistent with current international conventions. There's nothing to review there, beyond just adding a couple of new things, which in terms of substantial impacts are of very little consequence. Cabotage may need a review, but even the one that we have has not been implemented. That's the point which I'm making. So I will not propose, while there are aspects that need review, no doubt, what is more important is ensuring that administrators implement the laws that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We had two cadets that had intentions of asking questions. Please, if you are around, the floor is now open for you to come air out your question, please. Where are the other cadets? All right, thank you. Thank you very much, sir, for that brilliant and intelligent response to that question. It has been quite an interesting section with you all, and I want to thank you especially for your cooperation. We are gradually winding down on this paper presentation. It has been back-to-back of lectures since yesterday, and this event will continue tomorrow. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, you will permit me to please make welcome to the podium for the vote of thanks. I'd like to please invite to the podium no other than Dr. Gabriel Eto. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, please. Make that applause louder. Thank you.
Thank you. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it has been most intellectually stimulating, scintillating, mesmerizing, spellbinding. Put your hands together for our speakers. Dr. Koki, Dr. Akabogu, we appreciate you. You are in the bit of what they were saying, and it was a time well spent. Put your hands together for them. Our guest speakers, we thank you once again for coming. Thank you for spending so much time. And by the way, these papers were well researched. Cadets, you are just blessed. Be thanking God every day that you are here at a point in time like this. So I want you to rise up to your feet and give them a standing ovation. Cadets, rise up to your feet and begin to clap all the way. Put your hands together. They've done a marvelous work. You're welcome. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. You may all please resume your seats. Thank you. I'd like to remind you one more time that the theme for this year's lecture series still remains Revamping the Maritime Industry in Nigeria for Global Competitiveness, Issues, Challenges, and Prospects. And we also want to thank all our online community for spending time to follow up on this lecture series back to back. We are getting your reports and we say thank you. We acknowledge your efforts. At this juncture, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to please request the permission of the rector to please step to the front of the auditorium as he presents the plaque to our guest speakers for today's event. Thank you. A resounding applause there, ladies and gentlemen, please. Thank you. All right, at this point in time, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please, I'd like the first speaker for today to please step forward to the rector as he presents the plaque of honor. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I'll now invite Dr. Emeka Akabogu to the podium, please, to receive his plaque. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, this is a section for group photograph. Management staff and invited guests to please join the rector for a collective group photograph at the main entrance of the auditorium, please, while all the cadets remain seated. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. To all our online viewers, thank you very much. One more time, we just want to extend our gratitude for following up on this program back to back. Thank you very much. At this juncture, we will now draw the curtain to a close.